chosen ones, your awakening begins not with sight, but with the pulse beneath your skin, the echo of a time long erased. In the quiet moments, when the world holds its breath, your blood remembers secrets hidden beneath the waves, beneath civilizations swallowed by silence. Atlantis is not a myth. Its knowledge, its maps of energy, its lost codices, all reside within you, encrypted in sequences your conscious mind has yet to touch. Each heartbeat carries fragments of a civilization that once charted the stars and the oceans alike. The scientists called it impossible, yet your existence defied the laws they worshipped. DNA tests returned anomalies, patterns that could not belong to any known lineage. You were labeled a curiosity, a marvel, a warning, and some even whispered prophecy. The whisper is yours to answer, for it vibrates through your cells, a resonance that beckons, urging you to decode the hidden rhythm of a city lost but never dead. Every breath you take carries the salt of oceans long vanished, and every thought you think aligns with currents that no map can chart. The deep, the forgotten, the silent pulse of history, it stirs in you. You feel it when you close your eyes, when the hum of life quiets, when the ordinary slips away and something ancient stirs beneath. The memories are fragmented, dreamlike, yet undeniably real. A language of water, light, and frequency, waiting to be understood. You are not the first to awaken, nor will you be the last, but you are the first to carry the unbroken sequence that binds past and future in a single vessel, yourself. Somewhere in the abyss, Atlantis waits, not as ruins, but as a living pattern encoded into your bloodline, waiting for recognition. What you choose to do with this knowledge will ripple across time and space, opening gates unseen, revealing paths undreamed, and confronting powers that have long sought to bury the truth. The world believes it sleeps, yet in you, the currents of Atlantis surge, ready to break the surface. The moment you felt it, you knew something ancient had stirred within, a rhythm that did not belong to ordinary time. Beneath the surface of your awareness, the strands of your DNA hummed with knowledge, a language older than empires, older than the mountains, older than the seas. You traced your fingers over the veins in your wrist and sensed a blueprint embedded in the flow of life, a map coded in every pulse and every drop of blood. It was a code that the world had forgotten, a script written before words existed, before the first scribes etched symbols into clay or stone. Every heartbeat resonated with patterns that defied logic, yet made perfect sense to your intuition. There were repetitions, variations, and echoes of structures that seemed architectural yet biological. Designs that spoke of machines and temples built simultaneously in flesh and stone. You realized the code was not merely within you. It was you, a living archive capable of restoring what had been lost. As the pulse quickened, you felt the stirring of memory, not your own, a consciousness that had waited for you across centuries, that had whispered to other carriers who had vanished into silence. You were chosen to carry the continuity of a civilization erased from history, yet preserved in the language of life. The knowledge did not arrive as words, but as sensation, as a sequence of images and emotions intertwined with the rhythm of your veins. You could see corridors of light under oceans, Hear the resonance of chambers built to align with stars and tides, and feel the weight of wisdom that demanded awakening. It asked for no explanation, no justification, only attention, focus, and the willingness to recognize that you were the vessel and the key. Somewhere in the stillness, the presence of another echoed, familiar yet unreachable, a guide whose voice vibrated with certainty and calm. You did not know the name, yet the warmth of it brushed your consciousness like sunlight on water. Perhaps it was the echo of someone who had walked these paths before you, someone who had carried the burden of hidden knowledge and survived. The sensation was brief, leaving a question suspended in the veins of your awareness, a pull toward discovery, a hint of a path that curved and spiraled beyond the limits of what you could yet perceive. The first fragment of the code had awakened, and the journey had begun. The river of life carried fragments of what had once been thought impossible, and the currents twisted and turned through your consciousness like a hidden script flowing neath the surface of thought. A scroll emerged not from ink or paper, but from the strands of your own being, a luminous ribbon of information that shimmered in the spaces between heartbeat and breath. The images were vivid, a city of towers that rose from water like teeth of light, inscriptions etched in the coral of memory, diagrams that revealed energies bending through dimensions you had never touched. And yet the scroll spoke as if aware of your presence, offering glimpses of instruction while withholding the full message until you proved capable of perceiving its rhythm. You sensed a voice entwined in the current, gentle yet insistent, echoing truths across the layers of time, the cadence of words that seemed to belong to someone who had walked both flesh and spirit. Follow the streams within, for they will reveal the path no map can show, it whispered, and though you did not know the name of the voice, the resonance was familiar, like a light piercing the shadow, a calm in the storm. Perhaps it was the echo of one who had once carried the burden of awakening and had walked among men to illuminate what was hidden, whose lessons now threaded through the scroll encoded in your blood. The script unraveled in sequences that demanded patience and presence, images of orbs of light moving through chambers, arches shaped to align with unseen stars, channels of energy pulsing with intention. You traced the shapes with your mind, following the loops and spirals as if they were rivers flowing through your veins. Each turn offered new understanding, yet each revelation also raised questions, hints of a greater design that refused to yield itself fully. The scroll was alive, a living archive of Atlantis preserved not in libraries or catacombs, but in the consciousness of those who carried the memory. Somewhere between the pulse of your own heart and the rhythm of the scroll, a pattern emerged that demanded recognition. You felt a pull toward motion, a need to act without hesitation, to follow the streams even as the world above remained unaware. The fragments aligned and shimmered like constellations in a sky beneath the water, promising knowledge yet leaving a space of uncertainty, a question that awaited the courage to continue, a pull that hinted the path was far from complete. Beneath the surface of consciousness, a rhythm emerged that resonated with every cell, a vibration that seemed older than the mountains and deeper than the seas. It was a pulse that did not merely belong to you, but belonged to something far larger, a pattern that mirrored structures lost beneath the waves. Each beat was a signal, a whisper of architecture and knowledge encoded in the geometry of life, a cadence that matched the foundations of a city swallowed by time yet never gone. You felt it in your chest, in the subtle flare of blood in your temples, a cadence that called you to follow without hesitation. The energy moved like tides, rising and falling in harmony with memories you could not yet name. Stone and water intertwined in your imagination, as if the city itself had left a trail through your consciousness, a map waiting for recognition. The streets and halls of Atlantis emerged in flashes of light, not as ruins, but as living resonance, channels of power designed to align with the pulse you now carried. It was as though the city had imprinted its existence on the very blood that flowed through you, leaving you to decipher the echoes hidden in its resonance. You traced the pattern with your awareness, feeling each oscillation and tremor, sensing that the pulse was alive, aware, and responsive to the depth of attention you offered. The vibrations threaded through the layers of your memory, linking sight and sound and thought in ways impossible to articulate. Somewhere in the resonance, a shadow of guidance emerged, a presence luminous and calm, offering direction without speaking. A phrase brushed against your mind, a reminder that what is hidden can reveal itself to those who listen, that even in the silence, the truth moves, waiting for recognition. The pulse intensified, and the connection to the city deepened. You could feel the architecture in your bones, the chambers beneath the waves aligning with your perception. A bridge of awareness formed between the sunken halls and your own heartbeat, a connection that transcended understanding yet demanded action. The rhythm carried questions that had no answers and answers that could not be contained, opening spaces in consciousness where anticipation mingled with revelation. The city waited, its energy coiled and silent, aware of your presence, aware of the first steps you had taken into the currents that had slept for millennia. The pulse beckoned once more, a pull toward movement, toward uncovering what remained submerged and unspoken. The water was not silent. Even in the deepest places, where light had never touched, there was a voice threading through the currents. It did not come as language, but as a vibration that carried meaning without syllables, a verse suspended in the breath between tides. You felt it first as a tremor in your bones, then as a resonance in your chest, until the sound and your heartbeat were indistinguishable. The words rose from memory you could not name, from a source that had been with you long before birth, calling you toward an understanding you had only glimpsed in fragments. The verse carried both warning and promise. It spoke of a path carved not by force, but by alignment, of doors that would open to those who moved in rhythm with truth. As you listened, it began to shape itself into phrases, ancient yet familiar, as if spoken once before in a place where land met sea and sky. Among the shifting tones, a line emerged that burned itself into your awareness. The waters will part for the one who walks in the way. The way. The phrase carried a weight that felt eternal, tied to a figure whose steps had once calmed storms and whose gaze pierced through illusion. You did not see his face, yet the imprint of his presence was clear, an anchor of stillness in the rolling depths. The more you listened, the more the verse revealed layers hidden within its sound. There were instructions woven into the flow, diagrams disguised as melodies, truths disguised as ripples. You traced their patterns in your mind, each wave folding over the last, each tone carrying you deeper into recognition. The verse was not only a message but a key, and every repetition brought you closer to the lock it was meant to open. Somewhere beyond your reach, the source of the voice pulsed with patience, waiting for you to step beyond the threshold of hearing into the realm of knowing. The current shifted as though sensing your readiness, sending a final surge through the water that brushed against your awareness, like a hand at the edge of vision. The verse lingered, unfinished, carrying a final note that dissolved into the silence, leaving the question unspoken but heavy, as if the next word could only be found by walking where the waves themselves would make way. He sat alone in a dim chamber, the walls lined with parchment that held no ink, maps that existed only in the folds of his mind. His hands moved as if tracing coastlines and mountains that no one else could see, shaping routes that passed through oceans where no ships had sailed in millennia. You watched from the threshold, sensing that the act before you was not creation, but remembrance, as though his fingers were simply retracing paths that had been walked and sailed before the flood swallowed them. The cartographer's face was still, yet every muscle carried the weight of concentration. His eyes remained closed, unlit by torch or sun, as if sight would only distract from the precision required. He drew from memory buried so deep it had outlived entire civilizations, mapping not merely the surface of the world but the undercurrents beneath it. The lines he traced were not boundaries but veins, channels where energy flowed unseen, leading to places that could not be found by compass or star. Each stroke of his hand revealed more than land or sea. It revealed the skeleton of Atlantis itself, its arteries of light, its intersections where temples had once stood like tuning forks for the earth. You realized then that the maps were alive, not diagrams, but gateways, and that to follow them was to move between worlds. He paused once, tilting his head as though listening to something beyond the walls, then resumed, his movements more deliberate, as if the instructions had changed mid-drawing. You stepped closer and saw the faint shimmer where his hand passed, as though the map emerged briefly in another layer of reality before fading again. He had no need for pigment, for the truth of the map was imprinted directly onto those who witnessed its making. You felt a subtle pull in your chest, the same magnetic sensation you had felt when the pulse of the sunken city had matched your own. When he finished, he did not look up or speak. His hand rested on the final point, lingering there, as though it marked more than a location. You leaned forward to see it more clearly, but the light in the room dimmed and the walls seemed to bend inward. The cartographer's voice came low, a single sentence that cracked the silence, carrying a weight that left you still. What he said was not for the room, but for you alone, and yet it demanded no reply, only the next step. The water was shallow here, yet the light that filtered through it felt as if it had traveled from another age. You moved between reefs that pulsed faintly, their colors shifting in rhythm with the tide, until you reached a cavern where the sea narrowed into a throat of stone. The walls shimmered with coral that glowed in patterns too deliberate to be nature's accident. It was here, in the center of that glow, that you saw it, two beams of light crossing in perfect symmetry, suspended as if the water itself was holding it in place. It was not carved or built, but formed from the living coral, each branch weaving into the other until the shape emerged, unmistakable and luminous. The cross seemed to hum, a vibration so subtle it might have been mistaken for the tide, but you felt it deep within your chest, resonating with something that had always been there. As you drew closer, the shimmer intensified, and within that light, a memory began to form. You saw the image of a man standing on the shore, his presence both fierce and gentle, his eyes carrying the depth of oceans and the clarity of the sky. He raised no weapon, spoke no command, yet the waters bent toward him as if in reverence. The vision lasted only a heartbeat, but it left an imprint as enduring as the coral itself. The shape before you was no mere pattern. It was a mark of alignment, a reminder that the path you walked was part of a greater current. The coral cross seemed to shift as you moved, its angles bending to meet your gaze no matter where you stood. Shadows in the water formed doorways, but none opened. The hum grew softer, almost retreating, as if waiting for a word you did not yet know how to speak. You reached out, but your hand halted inches away, the pull strong yet patient, as though the moment was not yet right. The light around the cross dimmed for a breath and then flared again, sending a single beam deeper into the cavern beyond. The reef's glow flickered in response, and the tide shifted against your legs, urging you to follow. The path it revealed was narrow, winding, and hidden from the surface, a passage the currents had guarded for centuries. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its walls curved and layered like the inside of a living shell. At first you thought it was empty, but then you felt it, a slow, steady thrum that matched neither your heartbeat nor the tide. The sound came from the center of the room, where a structure rose from the floor like the rib cage of some colossal creature. Its surface was smooth, almost translucent, and beneath it flowed a faint light, pulsing in rhythm, as though the object itself was alive. You stepped closer, drawn by the steady cadence. The air felt heavier here, as if thick with memory. Patterns shifted across the surface in delicate waves, symbols and shapes appearing for moments before dissolving into the glow. You realized it was not just light you were seeing. It was information, moving in cycles, encoded in the rhythm of the pulse. The archive was breathing, or something close to it. The closer you came, the more you could feel its awareness. It was not a passive repository, but an active presence, guarding what it contained. Each beat seemed to scan you, measuring, weighing, searching for alignment. You did not touch it, yet the pulse reached into your thoughts, stirring images from your bloodline, flashes of the scroll in your veins, the cross in the coral light, the cartographer's unseen maps. It was as though the archive was testing the pieces you carried, ensuring they were part of the pattern it recognized. The beat quickened slightly, and you sensed that you were being invited deeper, not physically, but into a layer of perception, where the archive's true form could be revealed. The chamber darkened around you, the walls fading into shadow until only the glowing structure remained. It seemed to draw the room inward, narrowing your awareness to the rhythm and the light until the rest of the world dissolved. Then, without warning, the pulse shifted to match your own heartbeat perfectly. A warmth spread through your chest, and the patterns on its surface slowed, holding in place as though awaiting a final key. The archive's glow softened, and for the first time it felt less like a structure and more like a living being leaning close, ready to speak. The water deepened as you followed the channel out of the archive chamber, its flow pulling you toward a place where the light dimmed to near darkness. Ahead, the seafloor rose into a ridge of stone carved with markings worn smooth by centuries of current. At its center lay a circular seal, fitted perfectly into the surrounding rock, its surface marked with a pattern so intricate it seemed to shift each time your eyes tried to hold it. The tide pressed against your back, urging you forward. As you approached, The seal began to tremble faintly, sending ripples through the water that made the carvings appear to come alive. You reached out, hesitating at the final moment, sensing the weight of what it might release. The rhythm of the sea slowed, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Then it happened. A single thread of light seeped from the edges of the seal, winding upward like smoke beneath the waves. The lines brightened, tracing the ancient design until the entire surface glowed. A soft sound followed, not a rumble or crack, but something closer to a sigh, and with it came a voice, distant yet clear. "What was bound will be loosed in its time." The words carried the same cadence you had heard in the verse beneath the waves, a tone that seemed to come from beyond the reach of the ocean. It was the kind of voice that could still storms or call the dead to rise, and for an instant you felt the presence of one who had once spoken with such authority on the waters. The seal split down the middle, light pouring from the gap in a slow, deliberate surge. The current shifted violently for a moment, then steadied, as if something vast had moved far below. Through the opening came not ruin, but a soft golden glow, spilling into the water in ribbons that curled and twisted like living things. You stepped forward, crossing the threshold without understanding why your body obeyed so readily. Beyond the seal lay a darkness lit from within, a space where the ocean felt impossibly still. The glow drew deeper into the void, beckoning you onward. You could not see the end, only the faint silhouette of structures rising far in the distance, waiting in perfect silence for the one who would walk among them. The corridor beyond the seal stretched into an endless tunnel of black water, its walls smooth as glass, reflecting faint glimmers of the light you carried from the breach. Each stroke forward felt heavier than the last, as though the water itself was thickening, resisting your passage. Then you saw it, a monolithic archway ahead, its edges carved in spirals that seemed to twist deeper than stone could hold. The structure was immense, yet it floated in complete stillness, untouched by current or time. At the center of the arch was a circular panel, faintly glowing, its light pulsing like a slow breath. Around it, inscriptions curved in a pattern you could not decipher, but your body reacted to them instinctively. Something deep in your blood responded, as if the shapes themselves were alive and speaking in a language only your cells could understand. The closer you swam, the stronger the pull became, until you felt the compulsion to speak, though you had no idea what word was required. The glow in the center intensified, washing the tunnel in pale silver light. You closed your eyes, letting the sensation guide you, and in the quiet between your breaths, a name rose from somewhere beyond thought. It was not learned, but remembered, carried in the undercurrent of your being for lifetimes. You opened your mouth, releasing the sound into the water. The moment it left you, the temperature shifted, the pressure around you loosening as if the entire sea had exhaled. The arch responded instantly. The spirals began to rotate, slow at first, then faster, drawing the surrounding light into their motion. The panel split, releasing a column of brilliance that pierced the dark ahead, stretching into the depths beyond sight. The water trembled with a resonance that was both sound and touch, a vibration that seemed to pass through your bones and into the marrow itself. The gate opened, not outward, but inward, folding the space within itself until a new passage formed. Beyond it was not more ocean, but something else entirely. a vast expanse where the horizon bent in ways that defied the rules of the world above. Shapes moved within the glow, their outlines too fluid to define, and at the center of it all was a single point of absolute stillness, waiting for you to approach. The expanse beyond the abyss gate felt weightless, the water thinning until it no longer pressed against your skin. The silence was absolute, yet it carried a vibration so deep it seemed to bypass hearing entirely, resonating directly in the core of your being. Ahead, a vast structure emerged, neither wholly built nor wholly grown, its surface rippling like the skin of water under moonlight. At its center stood a spire, impossibly tall, crowned with a ring of light that spun in deliberate, measured arcs. The frequency called to you before you understood it was a sound. It was the same pulse you had felt in the archive, the same cadence woven into the verse beneath the waves. Yet now it was whole, unbroken, filling the space with a harmony that seemed capable of holding the sea itself in balance. You stepped forward, and the water yielded, parting in gentle spirals as if welcoming you to the heart of its design. Within the hum, a voice emerged, not as words, but as a presence that shaped the meaning within you. It was steady, patient, carrying the same quiet authority as the one who had once spoken to storms and walked unhindered across the surface of the waters. The presence did not command. It invited, and with that invitation came the weight of choice. The frequency could be carried beyond this place, but in doing so, it would awaken forces long kept dormant. You reached the base of the spire, where threads of light rose from the ocean floor, like roots reaching for the sky. The hum deepened, and every thread of light bent toward you, converging in your chest until the boundary between your heartbeat and the frequency dissolved. It was not simply a sound. It was a blueprint, a memory, a promise, and a warning all at once. The spire's ring of light slowed, its arcs aligning perfectly above you. For a breath, the entire expanse stilled, the ocean and its hidden city waiting on the edge of transformation. You felt the shift before it began, the subtle pull of currents turning, the weight of the flood that had once erased Atlantis, poised to move again.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.